Here we go with a look at how I make the crowd map for scattering the crowd on an outdoor track. This is assuming I don't have a fence template and the fence has already been made, just to show you how that works. So here in the lighting file, I'm making the sun straight up above the track so there's no shadows, and then cranking up the brightness of the sun and ambient light so that I can go in the game, get a screenshot clearly of the fences. Here I'm just checking my objects, so it's only the fence objects. You can go in the game, get a screenshot, and get a pretty just clean view of the fences themselves. I'm replacing the overlay here with just a white decal. Again, just to make the fence really clear. Dropping in that white overlay into the decals file. Pulling it up in game. And then we will, you see it's the ground is all white. The extended terrain I could have made white and might have made things a little easier, but I'm just grabbing a screenshot here. You can see how the fences are very obvious. I'm grabbing another screenshot without the extended terrain, just in case I need it. Can zoom in a little here for this. Okay, so now I've got my screenshots to work with. Again, this is just if I didn't already have a fence template. Occasionally the fences get done without the fence template, so this is how you can go about it. So I'm pulling in all my screenshots, lining things up, cropping it down, trimming out all the blue, so it's kind of a true reference for the actual extended terrain. Here I can grab the blue channel from my list of channels, and then by using levels I can just make all that white, so I just get a nice crisp reference for the fences there. There you go. Now I crop this so it's square and then scale it up to 4K, which is what I do my crowd maps as. And because this track, the track gets so close to the edge of the game terrain, I'm building my crowd map so the crowd will actually go out onto the extended terrain. I don't always do this. It really depends on, like I said, how close the track gets to the edge of the in-game terrain. So I am going over finding a previous year's crowd map just as kind of a starting point. Again, so I don't have to do everything from scratch. I basically have this template built that I use every time to make things a little quicker. So I duplicate my crowd map group over into my new file for the most recent track. I'll copy my fence template in there, or the screenshot that will serve as a fence template. Set it to multiply mode so I just see the black lines. And then now I'm rescaling this crowd map group from the previous year's track to roughly fit the current scaling. Finding a corner as a kind of a reference point, scaling things around, trying to get things to line up as close as they can. They won't have to be perfect because I'm going to go in and tweak all this anyway, but like I said, the closer I can get it, the less work I have to do by hand in the upcoming steps. So just taking a couple minutes to get that scaling close, and that looks pretty good. So now I'm taking this fence screenshot and converting it to a black color fill layer that I can edit. I'm just copying and pasting it into the color fills mask and inverting it. Now I can edit it. One of my first steps I need to do at this point is to basically make a selection of the inbounds on track area, what's inside the fences. So to do that, I'm just closing off these gaps where gates would be. Just kind of scrolling around, making sure everything's closed off. Here we go. And now, before I make the selection, actually, I need to go in and just erase some of these, looks like banners that are inside the track. So I'm just gonna zip through here, grab these. All right, now I can select the inbounds area in one go. I expand that by a few pixels. And then basically, so here I have a color fill layer, a black color fill layer that basically blacks out any area on the inbounds section of the track. That ensures no crowd are on the track. And then I have an outer glow layer effect or layer style on this layer, which basically just almost like automatically puts crowd right around the edges of the fence where you would expect them to be anyway. And I'm just referring to last year's to see that my outer glow is similar scale. Then I have a few, basically that gets you probably 80% of the way there. And then from that point, there's a bunch of little modifying layers. So I have last year's fence layers that I'm deleting and replacing with my current fence template that I took from the screenshot, and adding a little bit of stroke. That just gives a little extra buffer so that, again, no crowds show up overlapping the fence model. So that's black. We've got the track that blacks out the track area. Got this background fill layer. Got a white layer that's kind of for additional crowd that aren't right up against the fence. My main crowd layer up against the fence. And then I have another black layer that kind of thins out the crowd in areas that I want, and I kind of hand paint that layer. Then finally I have at the top another black layer that removes crowd around any objects or models that are, you know, such as concession stands or trucks or things off the track that you don't want crowd overlapping. So I've got a reference video that I'm looking at to kind of see where in real life the crowd was. So I just kind of do a lap around the track, taking a look at the video, erasing crowd where it seems a little thinner in real life, and then adding crowd where it looks like there should be more crowd. So you see me adding a little bit along that fence line. And so yeah, not much to say about this. It's really just going around the track on the reference video and trying to match the density of crowd on my crowd map. And most of the work I'm doing here is on this remove crowd layer. It's basically just a black color fill, and I'm painting in on the mask anywhere I don't want crowd to be, specifically along the fences. And again, this is like possibly excessive detail, but I just think it looks a little more natural when you have this variation. You don't just have a solid wall of the same density crowd all the way around the fence. You get these little groups of people at certain areas, and then there'll be sections of fence where people thin out, and it just yeah, it kind of gives this natural variation to the look of the crowd. If you weren't as anal like me, you could skip the reference video, but I like to get that realistic vibe. But with a little intuition, I'm sure you can do something to yourself without constantly referring to a video. Especially if you're building a non-replica track. If you're building a track from scratch, you could still get a very realistic looking crowd just by putting in some of these variations yourself. So I'm about finished with the lap here. And my map is looking pretty good at this stage. Checking some of my other layers. Trimming out any excess stuff. So now I'm going to my remove crowd around objects layer. And you can see, normally I like to do this stage after all of the other off-track objects have been placed. In this case, the off-track objects weren't done at the time that I was making this map, so I'm just using the satellite image as a reference and deleting things around places where bleachers will go. Basically, me or someone will later come in and put bleachers roughly where they are in this satellite image. So I'm just going ahead and making space out of the crowd for those, as well as with any buildings that are around the track, because we do have models that represent some of these concession stand or announcer tower buildings. This is pretty simple. Like I said, it's just if the other objects were placed at this point, I would have grabbed a screenshot of that from the game and pasted that in here, and I could have erased directly around the existing objects, which is what I often do. So that's looking pretty good. Now I'll export that as my crowd map. And next thing to do is take that into Blender, turn it into a crowd.